how to apply for the computer science major at University of Washington. For this event, we invited Alex to share his tips on how to apply for the computer science application at UW.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aiden. Thank you all so much for coming to tonight's event. I will be facilitating tonight's event, and we are very honored to have Alex Neal, president of Newport High School's programming club, come share his experience applying for UW's CS program. Alex has been accepted to many top CS programs and has plenty of experience to share. And tonight he'll be talking about the importance of high school GPA, what extracurriculars you should take, the UW application process, appeals, and more. After the presentation, we will have an approximately 15-minute Q&A session, and I can't wait. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me here. I'm definitely very excited. Just a bit about myself. My name is Alex. I am a current senior at Newport High School, and next fall I will be attending the University of Washington as a CS major. 3 years ago, when I was a freshman, I had one goal, and that goal was to get into UW for CS. And throughout my 4 years of high school, I've done extensive research, talked to everyone I knew that got into UW CS and a lot of people that didn't get into UW CS, and tried to learn what I could do to maximize my chances. The end result of my 3.5 years of hard work was an acceptance letter in early March. And today I want to share my experience. I want to share what I've learned over the last 4 years. And I want to share my advice to help you maximize your chance of getting into UW for CS or whatever your top choice major is. So with that, I'll start the presentation. This presentation contains a lot of my advice and tips. And after this presentation, we will have a Q&A session. I know it was said that the Q&A session will be 15 minutes, but depending on how long the presentation takes, it could be longer as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and start the presentation. And again, thank you for having me here. All right, so again, this presentation is how to get into UW CS. I know that this topic is really popular. I mean, for students, UW CS is great because it's a great CS program. Lots of people from Washington State go to UW, so going to UW allows you to stay with your friends for college. And I know for parents, they also really like UW CS because in-state tuition, paying $12K a year for a top 5 national CS program is a great deal. So I'm going to share my advice to get into UW CS. And before I start, I'd like to start with a disclaimer. So the advice in these slides are from my personal experience, analysis, and opinions of friends. None of this advice has been fully confirmed by admission staff, except for a few statistics. However, most of this advice has a lot of truth inside. But again, because a lot of this advice has not been completely confirmed or said by admission staff, this is not guaranteed to be 100% accurate. Furthermore, UW CS admissions changes from year to year. In some years, they look at GPA more. In other years, they look at essays more. There's changes from year to year. So, for example, 2 or 3 years from now, this advice may not be fully accurate. But I do think that overall, if you follow some general advice, even if the admissions process does change, if you try your best, that always sets you up to have the best chance of being admitted. So let's start off with this. This is something really important. Your UW CS application starts as early as freshman year. I know that college applications, you start doing them during junior year. pretty much the summer between junior and senior year. However, if you start right then you don't have much of a chance. But if you start preparing as early as freshman year, you have a higher chance because you can prepare your extracurricular activities, you can study hard for your classes, and for UWCS, the application pool is very competitive. Everyone you're competing against has been preparing for years, and so it's important to start early. So my advice today, it goes from freshman year all the way to decision day. So no matter if you are an incoming freshman or about to apply to UW, there's plenty of advice in this presentation just for you. Let's start with GPA. I know that GPA, a lot of people like to talk about GPA a lot. And GPA is a very important part of the UWCS application. So I'm taking this directly from the UWCS website. What they said is most admitted students have a GPA between 3.85 and 4.0. And another statistic is that their 25th to 75th percentile for GPA, this statistic is a bit outdated. This is, I believe, from 2 or 3 years ago. But the 25th percentile for GPA unweighted is a 3.93, and the 75 percentile was a 4.0. So that means the middle 50% of admitted students for CS that year had between a 3.93 and a 4.0 GPA. So I don't have the data on average GPA of admitted students, especially for this year. However, it's clear that GPA is important for UWCS. Definitely the higher the GPA, the higher chance of getting admitted, just like any other university. I do think that UW does care about GPA more than other schools, because when you think about it, they don't have recommendation letters, and they don't have that many essays. So your GPA is really important for UW. So with this in mind, definitely focus on getting good grades, especially in STEM classes such as math, science, and computer science. Definitely work hard, study hard, and if you ever feel like you might not do well in a class, especially a STEM class, make sure that you keep studying, use sites like Khan Academy and YouTube, and also don't be afraid to reach out to your teachers as well. There's a chance that if you have, for example, an 89.5 in a class, if the teacher doesn't like you, they might not round your grade. However, if you have always been talking to your teacher and asking for help when you don't understand a concept, then there's a higher chance that they would round your grade. Of course, talking to teachers, the point of that isn't really to get a good grade. The point is to establish a good relationship so that when you need help, you can ask for it. However, it is true that if you talk to your teachers a lot, you do have a higher chance of having your grade rounded if needed. So study hard, work hard, especially in STEM classes, and definitely talk to your teachers when you need help. Although STEM classes are important, make sure to focus on all of your classes as well, because after all, your GPA is your overall GPA. So if you have like really good grades in math, science, and CS, but you get bad grades in history and English, that is worse than having good but not great grades in every subject. So definitely focus on all of your grades and try your best to make sure your grades, all of them, are as good as they can possibly be. And if you do get a few Bs or other bad grades, it's not over, because there's still a chance. There's essays, there's still lots of other ways that you can stand out with your applications. So don't think just because, for example, you got a B in AP Calculus that you have no chance. That's not true. You definitely still have a chance. So the point is, focus a lot on your GPA, try your best, but even if your GPA is not perfect, you still have a chance, and never be discouraged. So GPA is important, but what really made you stand out are extracurricular activities. So with extracurricular activities, UW-related activities can really help your application. So here's a few examples. UW summer camps, and these are selective summer camps. For example, they used to have a math summer camp over the summer at UW, where it was in person and students would spend, I believe, 4 to 6 weeks living at UW and studying math with professors and current students. And there's also a bunch of other competitive UW summer camps related to topics such as CS math. So definitely try to apply for those. Another good activity to do is research projects at UW. And this doesn't even have to be UW Seattle. You could do research projects at UW Bothell, UW Tacoma. But if you do any research projects at UW, it looks good on your application. And not only that, you also gain some really valuable experience that will help you when you do end up going to college. Another activity that I've noticed that's getting more common is taking UW CS courses over the summer. So, and it's especially not only taking their classes, but also getting a good grade. And if you think in terms of admissions, if there's an applicant that's already taken some UW CS courses and they got really good grades, that means a lot. It means that they took college level CS courses at UW and did well. So there's a higher chance that if they do go to UW for CS, they will do really well in their classes. I know someone that what they did was they not only took an intro CS class at UW, they also took some advanced 300 level UW CS classes and did really well. And that showed admissions that they can handle the course load, because even as a high school student, they were taking core CS classes. Of course, it's really hard to have these UW-related activities. Research projects and competitive summer camps are hard to get, and not everyone has the time and money to take UW CS courses over the summer. So I don't think having UW-related activities is required. Certainly, it can help your application, but if you don't have any, don't worry, you definitely do not need them. I know just as many people that did not have UW-related activities that were admitted as those that did have UW-related activities. So my point is, if possible, try to have UW-related activities. However, if you don't have any, it is no big deal. It is totally fine. So let's talk about community impact. So this is something that colleges like to see, and UW is no exception. So the two ways to show community impact are through leadership and volunteering. So one of the most common volunteering activities is teaching free programming classes. This is really common. A lot of applicants do this. However, the reason why it's so common is because it's a good activity. It shows not only that you are willing to volunteer and help the community, it also shows that you know enough about CS to be able to teach it to other students, which is really impressive. And try to get involved with programming clubs at your high school. And if you can, try to get leadership positions. My advice, please don't apply to leadership positions just for college applications. Because if you do that, first, you most likely won't even get the position. And even if you do get the position, it won't be very fun. So apply to leadership positions for clubs that you actually want to lead, for clubs that you actually have ideas for. And if your high school does not have a programming club, it's the perfect opportunity to create one. Speaking from personal experience, when I was a high school freshman, my high school had one programming related club. It was computer club. And this club, while they did talk about Java, it was a small club. It was not that active. And so there were a lot of students at my high school that were really interested in CS, but didn't really have a place to go. So because of that, I started a programming competition club. And as the years went on, we eventually became the programming club at my high school. So if there isn't really a main programming club at your high school, you have the perfect opportunity to make one. However, if there already is a programming club, please don't make another programming club just for college applications. If there already are established programming clubs, consider joining them, helping out, and trying to get leadership positions. So I think extracurriculars are really important because extracurriculars show that not only do you have good grades, you also know how to contribute to your school and your community. And that's something that colleges really like to see. So this is a slide for everyone that's about to apply. Because at UW, when you apply, you can either apply as a CS or a CE major. CS stands for computer science. CE stands for computer engineering. Now, the thing to know is CS and CE are part of the same application pool. That means, for example, let's say you have a 40% chance of getting into CS. If you apply as a CE major, you still have a 40% chance. You have the same chance of being accepted no matter which of these two majors you choose. So what are the differences between these two majors? So CS has more application classes. For example, software engineering classes where you have a group project and your project is to make an app, make a website. And also in CS, there's more writing classes. Generally, CS has more writing classes, more composition classes, but at the same time, they have less math classes and less science classes. So at UW for CS, the only math you have to take is Calculus 1 to Calculus 3, linear algebra, and then for science classes, a lot of students already have that covered with AP credit. But on the contrary, with computer engineering, there's much more math requirements and science requirements. For example, physics, the entire physics series is a requirement. Differential equations is required. And I think the main difference between CE and CS is CE has more EE classes. For example, circuit design. So I guess one way to think about it, if you're interested in computers and programming and you want more of an engineering degree, where you learn more about hardware, and you maybe don't want to take as many writing classes, you would rather take science or math classes, then consider CE. But if you want more of a well-rounded major that maybe teaches you less about hardware, but more about software and teaches you a lot more about how to use software, then CS might be the major to choose. The most important thing, choose the major you like more. Again, it's the same application pool. So you don't have a better chance applying as one major over the other. And if you are admitted as a CS or CE major, you can switch between the two majors at any time. Let's say you apply as a CS major, you get admitted, you go to UW, and then you realize, maybe I want to do CE instead. Usually, let's say you are trying to transfer into CE, you have to fill out an application and everything. But if you are already a CS major, you can walk up to your advisor and say, I'm a CS major that wants to switch to CE. They give you a form, you fill it out, and you're now a CE major. So because you can freely switch between CS and CE at any time, this decision that you make right now is not final. But do think about it. Do you think CS or CE would be more interesting to you? And which one relates more to your extracurricular activities? For example, if you do a lot of robotics and hardware stuff, like Arduino, CE might be better. However, on the contrary, if you did more web design, maybe Uwcs, then CS might be better. Again, both majors, you have the same chance. So choose the one you like more. The application itself. So this is one of the most common misconceptions. There's no special application for UW CS. Just apply to UW. That's it. There's no special UW CS application. Please note, UW does not use Common App. Most universities do use Common App, but UW only accepts the coalition application. So this means that assuming that you are applying to other schools that are not UW, you have to use 2 application systems. So just be aware of that ahead of time so that you make sure you have enough time to fill out all of the forms on both application systems. And if you want to be considered for UW-CS or UW-CE, make sure to select computer science or CE as your first choice major. And also take a look at the informatics major, because a lot of applicants, they apply as a CS major, but they don't really know that much about informatics. And for a lot of students, informatics is actually a better fit for them. So what is informatics? Informatics is similar to CS. It's a really similar degree. At the end of the day, you learn essentially the same technical skills. And informatics focuses much more on the ethics of technology. It teaches more classes where students discuss, for example, how can we use this program in a responsible way to ensure that we are actually helping everyone? So it contains more classes about like applications of technology, but the trade-off is it contains less math and less theory classes. So ultimately choose the major you like more. If you are undecided between CS and informatics, then just look at the 2 majors, look at the classes and find the one you like more. I don't have the admissions details, so I don't know if informatics is easier to get into than CS, but please don't let that be a factor in your decision. If you really want to do CS, don't just apply to info because you think it's easier. Honestly, choose the major that you like more, because let's say you do apply to info just because you think it's easier to get into, and you do get accepted, then you can't really switch to CS even if you wanted to. So consider informatics, and if you do like informatics more, then maybe apply to that major. But ultimately, if you do feel that computer science or CE is your first choice major, apply to that major. Another thing to note is that you can put a second choice major. However, from what I've seen, especially if you put CS or CE as your first choice major, if you don't get in, they don't really consider you that much for your second choice major. So your second choice major isn't that important. And another thing, you can't just put CS as your first choice major and CE as your second choice major. They intentionally don't let you do that. You also can't put CS as your first choice major and info as your second choice major. So out of these 3, CS, CE, info, choose the major that you like the most. Don't think about acceptance rates. Don't think about anything else. Just really think and look at CS, CE, info. Which major do you like the most? Choose that major and put that as your first choice major. So on the UW Coalition application, you get 8 spots for extracurricular activities. So the important thing to know, this is 2 less spots than Common App. On Common App, you get 10 spots to put your extracurricular activities. On Coalition, you get 8. So you might find that you have to merge a few activities together, but honestly, this isn't too much of a challenge. For example, let's say on Common App, you have one activity that's all about teaching programming classes, and then another activity that's all about teaching golf classes. Then maybe on Coalition, you can just merge them into one activity called teaching. And then you can explain the classes you taught. So try to rank the activities from most important to least. So activity number 1, that should be the activity that's most important to you. Of course, important is subjective. So my advice would be to choose the activity that you spend the most time on, that means the most to you. And then that means activity 8 should be the one that you probably spent the least amount of time on. So please don't rank these activities in alphabetical order or random order. That sort of just confuses the admission staff. Because if you think about it, everyone reads from top to bottom, right? So when they start reading your activity list and they see the first one, that should be the most important one. and then as they read down, it should be less and less important. If it's just all in random order or alphabetical order, it can be hard for your best activities to truly show in your application. And for each activity, you get to write a description. So write descriptions about the activities that honestly describe what the activity was and what your contributions were. Most important thing here, do not lie. Because if you do lie and you get caught, then that's really bad. They probably would just reject you, or if you get caught lying on your application, they had already accepted you, they might actually take away your offer. So don't lie. Very honestly, describe what the activity was and describe what your contributions was. And another thing, you also get 5 spots for awards. So for example, these can be awards such as USCO, AMC. It can also be other awards such as an award for having a good GPA, or a volunteering award, or a DECA award. But the important thing is, just like your activities, rank them from most important to least important. So now let's talk about the UW essays. So UW has 2 essay prompts. The first essay is essentially just the Common App essay. It's essentially the same prompt and the same word count. I believe the exact prompt is tell a story from your life. And yeah, I think that's it. And you get 650 words, which is the same as your Common App essay. And pretty much almost all applicants just copy paste their Common App essay for the first essay. I guess if you want, you can add like a school specific part to the essay at the bottom. Like you can talk a bit about UW, but it's not required. I feel like a vast majority of applicants just copy paste their Common App essay and use that for their first UW essay. And I think that's sort of the point of the first UW essay as well, because they just want to know a story about you. Now, the second essay is the unique one. The second essay is the community essay. So you have 300 words to discuss a community that you are part of and how you have contributed to it. So you can actually talk about multiple communities if you want. Just find a way to connect them in your essay. And at the end of your essay, consider adding a paragraph about how you will contribute to the UW community as well. I forgot the exact prompt for the essay, but it's something about describe a community, describe how you contributed to the community, and describe how you will be part of the UW community. So some great essay topics can include stuff like a sports team, a programming club, a robotics team. My advice, don't try to choose the community that you think UW will like the most. Choose 1 or 2 communities that you really feel like are the most important to you, that you made the greatest contributions to. And those communities, write about those. My advice for the essays, start early. UW application is due November 15th. Start your UW community essay as early as July. That's what I did. And in fact, I ended up having to write 24 drafts of my community essay just to find one essay that I believe really represented me and my community. So this essay is really challenging to write. So my best advice, start really early and write many drafts. Of course, if you do write a draft that you think is good enough, then you can just submit that one. But there's a chance that it might take a lot of brainstorming and lots of tries to finally get the essay that works the best for you. Use the additional info section. So there's an additional info section on your application. And a lot of applicants think only use the additional info section if you really have to. For example, if you moved a lot during high school and never attended a high school for more than a year, then mention that in the additional information section. But even if you don't have circumstances like that to explain, it can be a good idea to write something in your additional info section that can help your application. For example, you could write something really short about your interest in CS. You can expand more on an extracurricular activity. Or maybe you can add more information about your academics that was not mentioned in your application. For example, let's say you self-studied some AP exams. On the UW application, they actually don't look at your AP exams or your AP scores. So maybe you can write on your application and write on your additional info section that I self-studied for these AP exams and I received a 4 on this one, a 5 on this one. But the most important thing is the additional info section is called additional info. This should be new information. Don't just repeat stuff from the rest of your application. And another thing, this is not another essay opportunity. Please don't write another essay. My honest advice with additional info section, just keep it short and brief. Include what you want if you think it will help your application, but don't waste the time of the AO. For example, maybe do talk about more about an extracurricular activity, but maybe don't talk about your favorite food when you were 5 years old. So the important part, write about stuff that is important that might help your application, but don't write too much. Don't waste the time of the AO. Okay, so that's all about the application. Let's talk about the decision itself, because a lot of applicants are really confused by the decision they receive, and it's hard to understand. So after your application has been submitted, it's time to wait 4 to 5 months for your decision. And that wait can be really stressful. So it's a good idea to apply EA to some top CS schools, such as Purdue or Georgia Tech, so that possibly you could receive some good decisions as early as January to reduce some stress. Personally, for me, I applied EA to some other top CS schools, and I knew as early as January that even if I didn't get into UW, I would at least still have another good CS program to attend. So that helped reduce a lot of stress. I also know someone that pretty much only applied to UW and a few other schools. And when it got near UW decision day, they were really nervous because they didn't have that many options because they didn't apply to other top CS schools. So although it ended up working out for them, it caused a lot of stress that probably just was not needed. So please consider applying EA to some other top CS schools that definitely reduce a lot of stress. So understanding your decision. Most CS applicants are incredible applicants. It's really rare that they would get rejected entirely from the UW. But if you do find that you get waitlisted or rejected, understand that this does not mean you are waitlisted or rejected from the major. It means you are rejected or waitlisted from the UW as a whole. For example, if you're waitlisted and you get off the waitlist, you would enter as an undecided major, not a CS major. There's no special waitlist for the CS major. So with that in mind, if you see a congratulations message at the top of your application portal, it's not over. Scroll down to see if you got into CS as well. Because if you see congratulations, that just means that you got into the UW. It doesn't necessarily mean you got into CS. So at the very bottom of your application portal, there's a page that says the major you applied to, and it will say like computer science or CE, and then it will say your assigned major. And next to it is the major that you got. So if you are accepted to the UW, there's 3 possibilities for your major assignment. And with the exception of pre-sciences, you will never receive a major that you did not apply for. So let's see all of the possibilities. So if you see your assigned major, computer science, in the College of Arts and Sciences, then that means you got into CS and go and celebrate. And let's say it says another major that's not CS, maybe, I don't know, biology. That means you got into your second choice major. And depending on how much you like your second choice major, this could be good or bad news. The third possibility, it says your assigned major, and next to it, it doesn't say CS or any other major, it says pre-sciences. This means you have been admitted to the UW, but you did not get into the CS major. And if you still want to go to UW-CS, then it's time to appeal. Let's talk a bit about appeals. So appeals are kind of like the waitlist for CS, because they accept appeals based on how many offers they gave and how many admitted students accepted their offer. So that means every year, the acceptance rate for appeals changes, because it's essentially a waitlist process where your appeal might be successful if there's room for UW-CS. So yeah, more and more applicants appeal every year because everyone is talking about appealing. So more applicants know about appeals, but appeals still give you one last chance to be admitted. So if you want to appeal, then appeal as early as possible, but don't rush. So I guess as a general rule, try to submit your appeal before April 1st or 3 weeks after the decision day, because I know the decision day changes from year to year. So maybe April 1st isn't always 3 weeks after decision day. And here's some tips for your appeal. Don't repeat things in your application. This is a new opportunity for you to describe stuff that maybe wasn't in your application. Don't just repeat the same stuff that you already said, because it's clear that your application for CS was not accepted. So now try to mention new things that might help you get into CS. The second piece of advice, again, not confirmed at all. This is just one idea. One idea is to discuss research at UW-CS. So maybe you talk about a specific project or lab or professor. Again, this is not confirmed or anything. This is just a good idea, especially if you have done research. But again, it's not confirmed advice at all. So also mention any updates to your application since you applied. For example, if you maintained a 4.0 GPA in your first semester, UW actually does not look at your first semester grades. So let's say you have been maintaining a 4.0 in first semester, maybe mention that on your appeal and make sure to emphasize your interest in UW-CS. And you will likely get an appeal response in late April or early May. And if you do not get into UW-CS and you are certain that you want to study CS, please consider other schools. It is really, really, really hard to transfer into CS as a current UW student. So yeah, that's the presentation. Thanks for listening, and we will now start the Q&A section.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alex.
Aiden, can we ask a question like when they register? I think somebody already had asked some question. Can we start from there? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the questions was what extracurriculars did like you yourself do in order to like better prepare yourself for the like UW-CS application process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I think back to my activities, I think I had 4 main activities that really helped me. The first was the programming club at my high school. I founded the club and was president for 3 years and helped grow the club to one of the largest at my school. The second activity was the programming club at the local middle school. I helped start that as well. And I volunteered there for 3 years to expand and improve the club. The third major activity I did was varsity golf. I was on the varsity golf team for 4 years, and I was a captain during senior year. And my fourth major activity was a research project at UW-Bothell. I did this over the pandemic. It was a research project where me and some UW-Bothell CS students, under the guidance of a professor, we made a telemeeting app using VR. So yeah, I think those were my 4 major activities. And I think what really helped was the fact that there were CS activities, but there were also non-CS activities. So there were many types of activities, which I think was important.
Okay, and Wilson Liu wanted to ask how many CS schools or CS programs did you apply to?
Yeah, so in total, I think I applied to around 20 schools. I applied as a CS major to all of them. And overall, I got into, I think it was 6 or 7. So definitely not really good results, but I'm happy with my acceptances. I do think that applying to 20 schools was a bit too much, but it all worked out in the end.
Zhi Yongjia, I'm sorry if I butchered your name, wants to ask, how did you get like the UW Bothell research opportunity?
Yeah, good question. So I just went under the UW Bothell CS website, and then I just looked through their projects, looked through the professors. I found some professors that had really interesting research, and I just emailed them. And one of them replied, they said they had a project coming up, and they offered me a spot. I know that sending cold emails is like, either you get lucky or you don't. And I'm really fortunate that I got really lucky and got such a great response.
Qian Yu asks, how much of the extracurriculars and awards section did you fill out in your application?
Yeah, great question. So I filled out all of the spots. I filled out all 8 of the spots, and for awards, I filled out all 5 of the spots as well. I feel like most applicants fill out all 8 activity spots and all 5 award spots.
Lee wants to ask, which schools do you apply for early admission or EA?
Yeah, good question. So I applied EA to a lot of top CS schools. I did not apply ED anywhere. But I applied EA to, I believe, Georgia Tech, Purdue, I think UT Austin, University of Maryland. There might be a few more, but I think those were the main ones that I applied EA to. And I received good decisions for most of them.
Yuko Z wants to ask, what CS classes did you take in high school, or what CS classes do you recommend like incoming freshmen to take?
Yeah, so again, the CS classes offered are different from school to school. The classes that I took AP Computer Science in 10th grade, and I took Special Topics in Computer Science, which is sort of like a post-AP CS class this year. And I guess something really difficult is lots of times these classes everyone wants to take. So because of that, it can be hard to get into CS classes, especially as like a freshman or sophomore. But if your school is APCS, definitely try to take that class. If they offer a post-APCS class, definitely try to take that class. And if not, then other CS classes like AP Computer Science Principles are also great classes to take.
There's a lot more questions in the chat, but Allison Liu wants to ask what's like the difference between EA and ED for the people who like haven't done applications before.
Yeah, so ED is binding while EA is not. So for ED, if you get accepted, it means you have to go. But with EA, if you get accepted, you still have a choice whether you want to go to that school or any other schools that you are admitted to. So yeah, the main difference is that if you have a top choice, then maybe apply ED there because it is binding. But EA is non-binding. So if you get into a school through EA, you are not required to attend.
Differently wants to know that you mentioned how more writing classes are required for CS compared to CE, and like what specifically is the writing class about, or if like there's multiple, what are they all about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's no specific writing classes. It's just that I believe for CE you have to take 10 credits of writing, while for CS you have to take I think it's like 15. But it's not only like writing, it's also like I believe for CS you have to take like 20 credits of history and like 20 credits of art. And for CE they don't have that requirement. Of course, a lot of students have a lot of AP credit that helps with those requirements, but ultimately, yeah, CS will have more non-STEM classes compared to CE.
Zhiyongjia wants to know more about your research project, like the time you spent, the results, and like any papers that were published.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, with that research project, I think personally I spent around 10 hours a week, and a lot of my group members spent like 15, 20 hours a week because they were actually taking it as a class at their university, and we had weekly meetings and everything. Um, our project was really fun. We checked in with the professor once a week, we gave presentations, and I think we had a plan to make a paper, but ultimately we just ran out of time. And since it was a class project for the UW Balto students, when the quarter ended, that pretty much just ended the project. So we actually did not end up writing a paper for that project.
Lee wants to know what schools you got into that you applied for and why you committed to UW as your final choice.
Yeah, so again, I don't really remember every school, but I got into UW CS, I got into Georgia Tech, I got into Purdue, Maryland, I think UCSB, I think UCSD as well. And really at the end of the day, it was just between UW and Georgia Tech. And I chose UW mostly because of in-state tuition, also because of location, Seattle location for internships and jobs is just really great. So yeah, that's the main reason why I chose UW.
Christopher's son wants to know, do you know how many students got into CS at UW from Newport High School this year? And also
Yeah,
as a note for like everyone who has questions, you don't have to type it into the chat. Feel free to like say it out loud. Yeah.
yeah, so I don't have the exact number, but I know at least 10 students from Newport High School that are going to UW this fall for CS. Again, I don't know the exact numbers, so at least 10, that's all I know.
Allison Liu wants to know if your school doesn't have post AP comp sci classes, so like special topics in CS, does that put you at a disadvantage when colleges look at your application?
It does not, because if your high school just doesn't offer post AP CS classes, then you aren't expected to, for example, take them at another high school. And when you apply, they do see like your school profile. So they see all of the classes available. So if you don't have a class, then pretty much UW knows that the class isn't offered, so it won't harm your application in any way. But if there are classes like that, then definitely not taking those classes might harm your application a bit. But again, if the classes aren't offered at your high school, it won't hurt your application at all.
Grace wants to know if you took any like CSE courses at UW like over the summer.
Yeah, personally, I did not because I already took APCS at my high school. But I know friends that did take CS classes at UW.
This is like one of my personal questions, but like I know UW has like a program where you can like skip like 2 years of high school and just like go directly into college. I think it's like early entrance or something. But like, does that help your chances of getting to like CS or whatever major you want at UW?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not too sure about this because I didn't apply to that program. I don't think I know anyone that did. Um, so yeah, I can't really answer that question because I'm not really familiar with that program.
Christopher wants to know if UW CS program considers like national tests such as the SAT and the ACT as a important factor during admission.
Yeah, that's a good question. So UW is test optional, but SAT, ACT scores, they don't really look at them that much. I think they said on their own website that the only case they would actually look at your SAT or ACT score is if you are about to get rejected by UW, like the school, not the CS major. Then if you have a strong SAT or ACT score, that might cause you to be waitlisted instead of rejected. But in terms of getting into UW CS, SAT, ACT score really, it doesn't matter that much. At least this year. This year it didn't matter that much. They even said like on their website that they only consider SAT or ACT score if you're about to get rejected by the UW as a whole. But definitely keep checking the UW website. They might change their policy soon. But I know that for this year, especially for UW CS, SAT and ACT score was not a very important part of the application.
Do you know like the application process for like UW Tacoma and UW Bothell? Because you said you applied for like UW Seattle. So Kiki wants to know like if there's like a difference in the application process.
Yeah, I think you have to apply to UW Bothell and UW Tacoma separately. I don't think either of them have essays. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, I think you have to apply separately, but there is a button on your UW Seattle application that says, like, consider me for admission to Bothell and Tacoma, but I think that's only if you get rejected by the UW as a whole. So yeah, you do have to apply separately for UW Bothell and UW Tacoma, but I think those applications should be easier than the UW application.
Wei Huang wants to know like if you know any people who got like rejected and what was like their most likely reason for getting rejected from UWCS.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, with any program, there's people that get accepted and people that don't get accepted. I mean, they don't tell you the reason that you get accepted or the reason you get rejected. So personally, I wouldn't really focus that much on the results of other people. Just try your best, and that will maximize your own chances of getting into UW for CS.
Do you know if like taking a gap year in between high school and college like affects your chance of getting into CS at UW at all?
I honestly don't really know for this question. I don't think I know anyone that's taken a gap year. My advice is just if you are considering taking a gap year between high school and college, maybe reach out to the UW admissions team and see what their advice would be about taking a gap year.
Zhiyongjia wants to know how did you manage the time between all of your extracurriculars and school academics as well as like any other activities you might have had?
Yeah, good question. I think the easiest way is to just always keep track of all the stuff you have to do, whether it's homework or stuff for activities. Use your time productively. For example, I would just do homework during school or even during a class if we weren't doing much during class. I personally wouldn't really recommend doing homework during lunch. You know, like lunch is a break. You should enjoy it, talk to friends, but definitely use your time productively. and keep track of everything you have to do. And if you find that you don't have enough time to get everything done, then prioritize. Pick the things that are the most important and or do this soonest to do.
Have you won like any math awards or like other CS competition awards such as like USACO or AMC 10?
Yeah, so I did AMC a lot in middle school. I think I was like AMC 8 honor roll, I think. But when I got to high school, I sort of stopped doing competition math, so I didn't really have that many of like AMC related awards. And yeah, with USACO, I was USACO silver. I think I reached USACO silver in 10th grade, and then after that, I didn't really prepare excessively for future contests.
Did you apply to like any private colleges or did you only apply to like state colleges?
Yeah, I applied to 6 private colleges. For some reason, I did not get into any of them. I do think that, yeah, private colleges are competitive as well, but they're great as well. For example, MIT, CMU, Stanford, all great for CS. So definitely don't like only apply to public schools. Definitely don't only apply to private schools. It's good to have like a mix of public and private schools to apply to.
Grace wants to know if like a perfect GPA, so a 4.0 GPA is like sort of very important. When you mentioned like the 10 students you knew at Newport who got into UWCS, like did they all have a 4.0 GPA or was it more varied?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a lot of them I don't know their GPA. It's kind of rude to ask someone what their GPA is, especially if you don't really know them. Um, Having a 4.0 GPA is like a boost to your application, but I don't think it's required. If you don't have a 4.0, it's not like your chances go down a lot. Definitely the higher your GPA, the higher chance you have. But even if you don't have a 4.0, you still have a chance. Just work really hard on your essays. And if you aren't a senior yet, then maybe try to keep your GPA as high as possible and do a lot of activities. So yeah, 4.0 can help, but I don't think it's required at all.
Does the amount of like AP classes in total that you take um affect like how UW looks at your application?
Yeah, so UW does really heavily look at the classes you took. I don't think looking at the number of AP classes is really the best measure of course rigor. So, for example, differential equations, that's not an AP class, but that's probably a more hard class than, for example, AP computer science principles. So I don't think looking at the number of AP classes is a good measure, but definitely try to take a lot of difficult classes, for example, AP math, AP science classes. Just try to take the most difficult classes that you can.
Lee wants to know like what all of your awards for your extracurriculars are. I know you mentioned like AMCA and USACO.
Yeah, so I had USACO Silver. I was a DECA state qualifier. I had a volunteer award. And what else did I have? I think I had other awards as well. Yeah, but I don't think awards were that important. I definitely think that extracurricular activities mean more than awards because extracurricular activities typically require more time and commitment than just a one-time competition.
Did you apply to any like liberal art colleges who like aren't really that popular for CS?
I don't think I applied to any of those colleges. However, I did apply to a few private colleges that aren't really known for having top CS programs, such as, for example, Northwestern. But I didn't apply to that many schools that weren't really known for CS.
Does UW look at your grades like individually? So like class by class basis, or does it just look at your GPA, overall GPA?
Yeah, so they look at both. They look at your overall GPA, but they also have like your course list. So they look at them one by one. Definitely, I think the course list, they probably look at that more than GPA. But again, this isn't confirmed, but I do know that they do look at your course list and your GPA. So they look at both of them.
Did you use like any college consulting services to better prepare yourself for like applications?
Yeah, so I did not have like a college counselor, but I think I did have like an essay editor. Pretty much we would meet about once a week and he would just give some advice about the essays and some edits to make. But I did not have like an actual college counselor or use any counseling services.
Okay. There's no. Okay. This is getting kind of specific, but does UW look at like individual assignment grades inside a certain class? In addition to your grade for that class and your GPA.
Yeah, so there's not really a way for them to look at that. I mean, unless you voluntarily tell them all of your test scores. I mean, on your application, you just report the class and the grade. You don't put like all of your test scores and all of your homework grades. So like if you did get like a 60% on homework, for example, but you got an A in the class, all that UW would see is that you got an A in the class. They don't see the specific grades.
Okay, a lot of people are asking about like the Running Start program, but I think you already mentioned that you didn't know, you don't know a lot about it.
Yeah, personally, I did not do Running Start.
Okay. Um, okay, so with that said, I think we're gonna take like 5 more questions because this is dragging out a little bit too long. So everyone post your last few questions, and if you have any questions that have been like unanswered, feel free to email the C2C team at c2c@littlemastersclub.com, the same one that we sent you the Zoom meeting link with. And we will try our best to answer your questions in a timely manner.
Then could you type the email to the chat
Okay,
box?
yeah, I'll type the email. So just feel free to email that email if you have any questions after the event. And I mean, this is like the end of the session, I guess. Okay, Wilson Leo also wants to know how much do awards impact your chances compared to like extracurriculars themselves?
Yeah, so again, I don't exactly know like how much exactly awards matter. I do think that overall as a whole, extracurricular activities most likely matter more than awards because after all, awards are like one-time competitions while extracurricular activities are over multiple years. However, if you are like UCICO Platinum or qualified for camp, then there's a chance that might matter more than your activities. But definitely, I think for the most part, your activities matter more than your awards, unless your awards are really impressive.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't think the questions are rolling in anymore, so I guess I'll just signal that as the end of the event. Thank you guys all so much for coming, and thank you, Alex, for sharing your experiences with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for everyone for attending, and to everyone applying to UW next year, good luck, and I hope to see many of you there next year.